Hey, I'm Lieutenant Ray Kelly with the Alameda County Sheriff's Office. I'm going to introduce the Hayward Police Department. Our PIO for Hayward is Cassandra Favel. We also have Acting Chief Matthews here and Captain Olson as well. So we'll give you a rundown on everything that happened this morning, starting at about 10 a.m.
Good afternoon, everyone. This morning, just before 10 o'clock in Hayward, officers were dispatched to a disturbance involving a domestic dispute. A male subject had shown up to the ex's house and went inside the residence, causing an argument. The people who lived there were able to get him outside, lock him out. He continued to cause a disturbance and received multiple phone calls from witnesses in the area. At that point, witnesses reportedly said he took out a handgun, fired multiple rounds in the area, even as he continued to leave the scene by getting into his car and driving away. Officers were in the area as he was attempting to flee. They located him and a pursuit ensued. As they continued through unincorporated streets in Hayward, the suspect gone onto the freeway and continued eastbound 580 to Eden Canyon here, where the subject exited the freeway. In an attempt to stop the pursuit from continuing, officers utilized a pursuit intervention technique, and that's where the suspect's vehicle spun out and lost control into the embankment. The suspect then fled on foot, armed with a handgun, northbound Eden Canyon. Officers gave chase, and at that point, the subject was seen attempting to carjack a nearby passerby at gunpoint, and that was when officers intervened and shots were fired. The suspect was taken into custody. He was treated for at least one gunshot wound and was transported to a local medical facility for treatment. And that's where I'll pass it over to Lieutenant Kelly to give further updates.
So following up on that, our preliminary investigation thus far has revealed that this vehicle that's over here on the embankment was earlier involved in a kidnapping and robbery situation in the city of Emeryville. We're working with Emeryville Police Department right now to get further details. That just came in, that this car. Our suspect was armed with a handgun. He had multiple magazines. We know that he fired close to a dozen rounds at the scene of the apartment complex. We believe that had people not intervened at that complex, that it's likely he might have committed a homicide. While the pursuit was going on, we've learned that he was actually holding the gun up to the pursuing officers and threatening them with the handgun. This was a very active, unfolding situation, very dynamic. When they did the pursuit intervention technique here, they were able to push the car up into that ravine on the side of the road. That did not stop the suspect. He continued to try to flee in the car as the officers were trying to get out of their cars to approach him. He rammed one of the patrol cars. We believe one of the officers' legs was pinned between the door and the frame of the door, and he was injured. So we have one injured Hayward police officer that was taken to the local hospital. Non-life-threatening injuries, but we have to see the severity of those injuries. More to follow on that. The suspect has since been pronounced deceased at the hospital. We're working right now on identifying the individual and also working with notifying next of kin. This investigation is complex. There's multiple locations here, all the way from the apartment complex, the route of travel, the pursuit intervention technique, and then as you go up the road, there was a resident who lives up the road into the canyon. That's a rural area. It's mostly ranch land, small community up there. One of the residents was on her way to work this morning when she came across this man with a gun, stopped her car, put a gun to her, and threatened to shoot her or take the car from her by force with that handgun. That's about the time that officers intervened and the shooting occurred, where they used deadly force. So that's kind of the timeline that we're looking at. And right now, this is a joint investigation. However, the Sheriff's Office is leading this investigation. You have two agencies involved. You have the Hayward Police Department officers involved in the Sheriff's Office jurisdiction. transparency is important in this investigation. So that being said, the Sheriff's Office, we're going to follow our policies and procedures, and the City of Hayward is going to follow their very strict policies and procedures as it involves use of force. So all of this information ultimately will be public record under Senate Bill 1421, so all the facts of the investigation will come out. At this time, the scene remains active. We're going to have people avoid the westbound exit onto 580 East Canyon for now. We're working with our local schools to make sure parents are able to get their kids from school. And this scene is mostly contained to this area, so hopefully won't be putting people out too much longer. We have our crime scene personnel here, our crime laboratory personnel, and we'll be doing a very comprehensive and thorough investigation and working with all of the involved parties here. At this point, I'll open up for questions. No. He was a one-person deal. He was obviously set on violence and gun violence, and we're trying to get more information on the Emeryville case, that attempted kidnapping or kidnapping that occurred related to some type of robbery event that involves this vehicle. We're also trying to figure out our suspect's criminal history. It appears on the surface that he's got an extensive criminal history, and we're trying to learn about the relationship between our domestic violence victim and the suspect as well.
So you know that the car is tied to the kidnapping, but you don't know if the suspect is tied to it?
That's what we're working on. We know the car is wanted, and the car is wanted out of Emeryville for a series of crimes related to the kidnapping robbery.
What area did you say this started at with the domestic violence?
This started in an apartment complex off of Gary Drive. It's a very large apartment complex on top of the hill above 580 right there. Half of that complex is Sheriff's jurisdiction, and the other half is City of Hayward Police Department jurisdiction. So both agencies are very familiar with it. It was within that complex during that encounter where the suspect fired close to a dozen rounds. So he was actually an active shooter at one point, and we were getting multiple 911 calls saying there's a man with a gun firing a weapon in the complex. That was a big response from the Hayward Police Department. That information was also put out to the Sheriff's Department, and so both agencies responded to that emergency with the information that this suspect was actively firing. Then learning as we pick up the vehicle and begin to follow it, he's flashing guns at us, and he's traveling at a low rate of speed, which is concerning for the officers. He's not trying to flee at a high rate of speed, so officers are concerned that is he trying to lead us into some type of ambush or attack, or is he going to jump out? He's obviously showed the intent to fire the weapon. He's already fired it. He's shown it to us. So officers had to be very strategic in how they operated and how they came about it. They made a decision to do the pursuit intervention technique here. It's the safest spot. It would have been much safer here than anywhere else along that travel route. And so that ended the pursuit part of it. And then when he jumped out on foot with the gun in hand and began to go northbound through the canyon, that's when our resident, who's just coming down trying to get on the freeway to go to work, gets encountered by this man with the gun who basically threatens her life and threatens to steal her vehicle. And at about that time, that's when the officers are seeing this. So all of this is captured on either body camera and or situational cameras. We believe there's cameras in the canyon that may have captured part of this, but we do have body camera from the police department and the subsequent body camera from the Sheriff's Office of officers that arrived and responded to the scene.
So do you trouble check shots fired on the
Correct. Yeah. So Hayward initially took the 911 call for this. It was a very active shooter situation. You have a man actively shooting a gun in an apartment complex, high density housing, a very big emergency. They respond appropriately. They're doing their job. They pick up the vehicle. They get threatened by this suspect. They continue to keep public safety in mind as they find a location that's not highly traveled at this time of day. They do a pursuit intervention technique. It works. Unfortunately, one of our officers is injured, but will survive. And then he subsequently keeps going up the road about a quarter mile, and then carjacks this poor woman that's just trying to go to work.
Did he get the vehicle, or?
No, he didn't, because the officers were able to intervene and use force at that time. But he was armed with the gun the whole time. He had the gun. We found an extra magazine in his pocket with more ammunition. So right now we're trying to track down. It does not appear the gun belongs to him, and we'll figure out exactly where that gun came from.
Is that a handgun, or?
It's a handgun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You say Gary or Gary Drive?
Gary, Gary. Go ahead. Any questions over here?
If you could say your name, please.
Yeah, I'm Ray Kelly, Raykelly. I'm a lieutenant. That's Officer Favel, Fovel, Cassandra, with the Hayward Police Department. And are there any more questions? So,
Yes.
yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I got here at 58.
Okay.
Can you give me a quick rundown again, please? Now that
I'll give you one on the side. How's
Yeah,
that? So I don't have to hold all these people up.
Was the guy on foot when your
He was
officers
on foot.
pursued him?
He was on foot. Once the pursuit intervention technique happened, his car was disabled. He then jumped out of the car with the handgun on foot, ran about a quarter mile up into the canyon, and that's when our innocent victim is coming down in her vehicle and gets encountered by this suspect. At that point, the officers are there. There's obviously they're in fear for her life as a victim of an armed carjacking. We believe force is used at that time. We have all that on video. We're putting all the pieces together here in the coming weeks.
Time of day?
This is about 10. This whole event started unfolding about 10 a.m. and shots were fired somewhere around 10:15 a.m. So 15 plus minutes. Low speed chase, which was concerning, like I said earlier in my comments.
Age and any other information?
I don't have any of that
Residence?
right now. We're
Nothing.
still trying to identify all that. But he has been pronounced deceased at the hospital, and we will follow all of the protocols that we need to follow and provide all the information that we can as of right now. That's about all I have right now.
Was it about one gunshot wound? Two?
He had multiple gunshot wounds.
How many officers were involved?
Just I think probably 3 or 4 at the shooting scene that were involved at the scene, but not all of the officers fired.
Sure. How many vehicles were involved when he was heading up the canyon?
I don't have that on me.
Patrol cars?
Well, you had the sheriff's office responding, and you had there could have been a dozen cars at one time. But I think what our responding officers were trying to do was get people out of the way and keep the area safe so that the other officers could deal with the unfolding emergency. This very well could have gone bad for our officers. This suspect showed a propensity for violence. They used very good tactics and had to make important decisions, and I think that we're thankful that none of our officers were hurt.
And it did involve both Hayward and the sheriff's department?
Yes, because we share jurisdictional boundaries, and so we often notify each other through dispatch about unfolding events. So our officers were here as quickly as the Hayward officers were when the intervention happened.
Is it accurate to say that both Alameda County Sheriff and Hayward, I want to be able to accurately represent this, were involved in
No.
this sort of gun shooting?
The sheriff's office was not involved in the shooting
I see,
incident.
thank you.
The sheriff's office responded to this unfolding event, and by the time we got on scene, the shooting had already transpired for the most part.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Were bullets accounted for at the apartment complex when you started shooting?
Yeah, so Hayward's gone back there. They obviously have people on scene. We have to account for all the rounds that were fired. Some of them were fired into vehicles. Some of them we need to figure out exactly where they all went. But nobody there was a victim, and there's been no reported injuries from that active shooting scene at that location.
Sorry for what you said. Brandished or fired at Hayward?
We know he brandished Hayward PD, and he was going at a low speed. So that's an unusual tactic. We don't often see that. So that was concerning for them. So, like I said, once he got off here, at this time, I don't think so, but we're still processing the scene. But he was actively brandishing and holding a loaded weapon to our victims at the carjacking scene. Okay?
Thank you guys.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.